I call Barbara Kuriga.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. It's a pleasure to again speak on the Compensation for Live Organ Donors Bill in the third reading. And as others have pointed out, it is compensation rather than the financial assistance that it was originally introduced at. It's a much better concept because people do this for love or for the willingness of being able to help another human being, not for the financial implications of it. But it's also important that they're not out of pocket. It's been a pleasure to be working on the Health Committee again. The Health Select Committee generally is working through our programs, and it's quite common that we come in here and we're all united in one cause, which we are behind this piece of legislation. But nothing is ever as simple as it seems, and it is a no-brainer. Everybody was for it, but there was obviously some pieces in the legislation that we just needed to tidy up as we worked our way through, mainly around the levels of compensation and some of the other details that needed to fit in with other acts which it affects. So I'd like to acknowledge the member Chris Bishop again for bringing this forward, and the Honourable Michael Woodhouse and Cam Calder before them. So a lot of people have mentioned today that live organ donors are heroes, and that organ donors offer the gift of life, and this is pretty special. So what better gift could you give somebody than an organ? And I really think it takes a real courage from a person to be able to do that. For a loved one is one thing, but for somebody who is outside of their family relationship, I think it's even a bigger sacrifice, and I really want to commend all those people that have done that. It is important because, as we know, our road toll is going down on what it has been. Our roads are getting safer. Unfortunately, we're still having a few tragic accidents, and that's really sad, but we are trying to limit those and bring those down. So for those people that need organ donations, we've got to find a new way. I've also been listening to the conversation as we've worked our way through this bill in terms of future discussions that we'll have around organ donors on driver's licence and in wills, and the difficulty that family members have honouring that donation when the time actually comes. Despite the good intentions, it's not actually that easy for people to give away the organs of a family member, often after they've passed away. So it's really important to remember that these donors aren't sick. And I looked up on the New Zealand donors site, and you can, if you're fit and healthy, you can actually give an organ donation up to the age of 80 years of age. And while that actually seems quite a length of time, my grandmother just turned 100, and I remember her having a hip operation well into her 80s, and she was up and about a couple of days later going, you can't kill weeds. So, you know, she's 100, and some 80-year-olds are in very, very good health. So we've talked about cost neutrality, and that's really important. We talked a lot about ACC and the 80%, but actually these people are giving up an income to go away and do this, and it's important that they be fully compensated. When you end up speaking on the third reading of a bill where everybody's particularly on the same page, and you've heard all the discussions up until now, and there's a few more to come, sometimes you look in a few different places for research, and I happen to be with our esteemed chair of the Primary Production Select Committee today, Mr Ian McKelvey, who spoke about his taxi driver who desperately needed an organ transplant. He said it was amazing. He went off to Auckland, he had the transplant, he was out of hospital within a week, and he was back at work driving Mr McKelvey round within 3 weeks. And so we can be grateful for the taxi driver, for the organ donor, and also the fact that Mr McKelvey's transport has not been put in danger. So really we talked about the 100%, we've talked about the wills and licences, we've talked about so many things through this process. It really is a no-brainer. It's just about time to move through and get on with it. One of the things that we did decide that we needed to do through this process was to put it under the guidance of the Director General of the Ministry of Health. It was previously under the Chief Executive of the Ministry of Social Development, but because of the Ministry of Health, their primary interest in organ donation meant that it was just a much more sensible place for that to be. So, and others have talked about future-proofing as well. There may be other types of organs that we're able to donate in the future, and I know a conversation happened along the way several times about 3D printing, and who knows what the future might bring. We all know how slow legislation can be at times, so it's great that this is future-proof so that we don't have to go through the whole process at any time in the future. We can just make sensible changes. So thank you again to all of those donors. Thank you to Mr Bishop, and as a member of the Health Select Committee, it's a pleasure to be recommending this piece of legislation to the House. Thank you.